The Sharks lose a tough game 3-0 against the LA Kings on Jonathan Quick night. Oh boy, here we go. All that and more after this. But first, if you want to be a part of the show and Teal together and interact with us, check us out across all the social media platforms, that being the Twitter, the Instagram, Facebook, YouTube chat, the SoundCloud comments, of course, Reddit, and then all of the shenanigans that go down over on the Discord. But everything and all that and more is on tealtownusa.com. I am joined by Mark Eisenberg. Mark, how are you doing?
I'm actually not bad. Without taking consideration of the game impact, I'm doing pretty well, thanks. How about you?
You know what? I've become numb to the situation, right? I mean, it's kind of at this point where we are what we are, and where we know where we're going. So just embrace that. But still, it is kind of sucky though that the Sharks get shut out on Jonathan Quick night, no less, and really just look flat throughout that entire game, and even from the get go. I mean, in that first period, just it looked like both teams were skating through quicksand. Not really a lot of flow in either offensive zone. I mean, I think they had a graphic up with the total zone time, and for the Sharks it was 2 minutes 30 seconds, and for the Kings it was like 4 minutes and like 50 seconds, right? So it was nearly double what the Sharks had. But I thought it was very curious because it's like, what about the other 18, not 18, what about the other 13 minutes that was unaccounted for? You know what I mean? Like, that's all neutral zone play, and just a lot of quicksand kind of stymied play, and I felt like that's what we were watching in that first period. I don't know about you, but what did you see from that first period?
Yeah, not a lot of strong possession from either team. The Sharks definitely looked slow. I thought the Kings were a little bit better in the first period than the Sharks, but for the most part, it just wasn't good hockey all around.
Yeah, just wasn't good hockey, and they ended up the shots on goal ended up bearing that out. It ended up being 10-6 in favor of the Kings, and like I said, just a very kind of weird flowing game, and if we take a look. I mean, through that first period, I felt that their face-offs were pretty good. I think through that first period, I think it was something of 8 of 10 face-off wins or something like that. It was in the high 70s, in the 80 percentile range in that first period. But again, every time that they got the puck, even in the offensive zone, when they did get an offensive zone face-off win, it was one and done. It was literally one attempt on net, if that. It just seemed like there was no flow from the back end. The back end didn't really feel like it was, putting a lot of shots on net and really dragging the puck through the neutral zone. I thought it was a lot of lazy play with a lot of lazy kind of passing.
Yeah.
And again, it just lacked flow. And I don't know, come to expect this game looked very familiar of like a Dave Tippett Arizona Coyote kind of game. You know what I mean? Just that kind of hard to watch.
Yeah, I hate to say boring, but it just wasn't an exciting game all around. And I think it got a little bit better as the game went on, and teams, specifically the Sharks, started getting to get some chances. But I think, yeah, I mean, it's reminiscent of like one of those games in the back when you'd watch the Sharks playing the Coyotes or maybe the Wild from back in the day before they actually got exciting. And yeah, you just watch and it's just like, oh God, something happened, please.
Yeah. Through that second period, though, it did get a little bit better. The flow did pick up. The shots ended up being 14-14. So, they did get some back and forths and even, but, some even chances back and forth. But it ended up being a lot of it being on power play time. The Kings would go 1 for 6 tonight on their power play. But the Sharks would just take a season high penalties, a number of penalties. And again, I think that also aided or aided to their disadvantage in the flow. They just could not establish their game, and I felt again every time that they did start to get maybe one or two good shifts within the LA Kings zone, they'd end up taking a penalty, and it just would end up unraveling. It just seemed like they couldn't, just get out of their own way. I don't know. What did you see in that second period?
Yeah, I agree. The penalty trouble today was kind of weird. We haven't seen that a ton from the Sharks like this, but it was just nonstop, like you mentioned. You get a few minutes of 5-on-5, then another penalty, and some of them were stupid penalties too. Whether it was like neutral zone penalties, just nothing
Stick
needed.
penalties,
It wasn't like
it
wasn't. They weren't saving goals. It was just penalties that didn't need to happen. So it was hard to get a 5-on-5 momentum going or build anything shift upon shift when you're doing that. You get a good shift together and then you're back in the box and you're killing. And sometimes you can get momentum off the kill, but that just wasn't the case today.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the one power play goal that they did give up was in that second period. Comes 6:57 into the second period. Anze Kopitar, his 16th from Jersey, and just one of those kind of yucky, grimy goals that we associate with Anze Kopitar. He had been on a hell of a schneid, so for him, it was a rewarding goal. You could kind of see on his face the look of relief because he hadn't scored in a while, and he started off the season really hot, but fell off. Like I said, though, unfortunately, the Sharks, they would just continually, shoot themselves in the foot, and it finally burned them. And the penalty kill I'm not worried about. 1 for 6 statistically is a pretty good night. But unfortunately, when you're not scoring any goals and you're not, getting, when you're not getting the grade A chances, and then when you do get the grade A chances, get stymied by the opposition's goalie. Because I thought Cal Peterson really stood on his head in that second period and really kept the Kings in it. I think that they could have easily been tied at the end of that second. With just the kind of momentum push that you saw the Sharks had. But again, those self-inflicted wounds from earlier in the period sucked the life out of them, right? So it just the consistency, and then when they did get the consistency going a little bit, their goaltender Cal Peterson was already locked in.
Yeah, and I think Hurdle got a few good chances in there. Peterson made a few good saves. And yeah, like you said, I think the game shifted back to a level playing field, if not a little bit more, even in favor of the Sharks there in some of the points in the second period. But then again, the Kings are the ones who scored 2 goals. So that Kopitar goal, I thought it was a pretty sick shot from where he was on the ice, far side. Reimer didn't really have much of a chance on that. I believe it was Burns who failed at a clearing attempt right before the goal happened, which I thought was kind of crappy because usually he's got a hard wrister. He could usually wrist that out of the zone pretty well, but he failed, goes right to the defenseman. He passes it across, and then suddenly Kopitar is hitting the opposite side post and in. So it was a goal that could have been avoided. But like you mentioned, I'm not going to really be sour about killing 5 out of 6 penalties, especially with how that penalty kill's done the whole season.
Yeah, and I thought that tonight's game was one of Brent Burns' one of his weaker outings of the season, and I think he looked a little tired, and I think you could kind of see that in his skating tonight. But unfortunately though, that the Sharks would go down again from this time on a Philip Deneau goal, his 18th of the season, Jersey and more. So Jersey factoring in on 2 of those goals tonight. He's getting his 18th, and this one, just losing track of the puck. You get Philip Deneau getting a good chip shot in, and unfortunately finds a seam on Reimer. But again, this was a failed clear. It was the Sharks had gotten kind of hemmed in on their own zone. The self-inflicted wounds of not getting the puck out of the zone, and again, the Kings, kind of what we've seen them do this year is kind of capitalize on the mistakes of other teams. They don't particularly make a lot of mistakes, but what they do end up doing is if there is a turnover or if there is a fumble on the blue line, they have burned a lot of teams that way, and it seemed like that was kind of playing to script in that second goal from Philip Deneau, and what a pickup by LA. I mean, he's been a revelation for them in extending their depth, and one of the reasons why they are kind of poised to be on this playoff run here.
Yeah, he's up to nearly 20 goals. So definitely a good pickup. That goal, I'm not gonna really blame anyone too harshly on that goal. Reimer, I don't love the rebound, but at the same time, it's a tricky shot to pull in. I think it hit him like upper right shoulder, bounces. It's kind of hard to control it as a goalie, and I think he also had kind of lost track of the puck. Middleton gets beat. I think it was Middleton gets beat, and maybe he could have tied up the forward a little bit better. But he wasn't like in a bad position. He wasn't in the wrong place. So it was just he got beat, and it resulted in a goal, chippy goal, but that's what you need sometimes. So nice play for the Kings. I saw Dursey. I think he assisted on both of those first two goals, and I hear his name all the time. Every time we play the Kings, I'm hearing Dursey throughout the game, all game long.
Yeah, he's one of those players that has really kind of been a revelation for them in the absence of Drew Doughty, and again another one of those pieces that is kind of one of the diamonds in the rough for Rob Blake. So it's reflected in his ice time status. I mean, he had 26 minutes tonight of ice time, and that's pretty high for a defenseman of his ilk. He's only 23 years old. He's 6 foot, 195 pounds. So they're really relying on this kid, and I think that they're gonna, I think he's gonna kind of come to blossom as the next generation of LA King defensemen. So, nice diamond in the rough there for sure. Going into that third period, the Sharks, as you would expect with the score effects, end up getting the majority of the shots. It was 9-3 in favor of the Sharks. However, again, those 9 shots kind of deceptively high because it seemed like a lot of them were low danger shots. A lot of them coming from the perimeter. The Kings really didn't give up a lot of grade A chances tonight, and the ones that they did give up, I mean, Cal Peterson kind of just stood on his head. So I think it was one of those nights where it's not only are you playing up against the Kings system, but you're playing up against a goaltender who maybe trying to shake some of the demons from that 5-0 game. But what did you see out of Cal Peterson's game, Mark, that just kind of kept them rolling throughout the whole game tonight?
Yeah, I think it was just the best word is just solid. He wasn't like extraordinary because he wasn't really tested to be at that level. But I'd say the hurdle chances, and then Meyer had a couple good opportunities that he stopped, and he made the saves that they needed. So he earned the shutout. I think the Sharks' shot numbers are a little bit deceiving. Off the top of my head, I would say maybe 6 or 7 high danger chances the entire game.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, with how we've scored against the Kings all season, I think it was 4, 5, and 6. I want to say the 3 games we played prior. But yeah, they probably were looking for some revenge there, and Peterson gave them that tonight, especially in a night that's honoring another goalie. So that was kind of nice, I guess, for them. But yeah, I think from a Sharks perspective, you watch that game, and it's kind of the same thing that when the Sharks have lost that you see. It's just like the same players play well. Meyer, Hurdle, I thought they both played well. Hurdle specifically played very well, I thought. I think Carlson looked good again, as he has since coming back from his injury. He's carrying the puck. He's making really nice passes. But again, it's just like I don't notice any depth, like no depth chances, no depth opportunities.
I'm going to challenge you maybe a little bit on this one. I thought Logan Couture and Timo Meyer had pretty bad games, to be honest. They're both -2. Timo had 4 shots on goal tonight, mind you, but he did have 2 penalties tonight. And Logan,
sure,
Logan had 53% on the face-off, so that's okay. He had almost 3 minutes of ice time on the power play. 3 minutes 13 seconds on shorthanded time. 3 shots on goal, but those are two players that I expect a little bit more defensively from. And
I
Timo, I thought that the two penalties that Timo took were pretty lazy. But again, I think that you feel for a guy like Scott Reedy because he almost scored, tonight. So, I felt that fourth line, kind of brought it with. I liked. I don't know that I liked Balsers being on that fourth line, but I definitely liked Noah Gregor and I liked Scott Reedy being together. But maybe having Balsers together with those two, gives them a little bit more of a playmaking guy. With two guys that kind of like to, shoot the puck. Well, one's kind of a crash and bang guy, and the other one's a shooter. But I see the thinking there on that fourth line. The third line tonight, Cogliano, Bonino, and Nieto were just meh for me. I mean, 2 shots from Cogliano, a shot from Nieto. But nothing really too dominant. But yeah, no, I think for me tonight, I thought Logan's line was the one that was lacking a little bit.
agree with you on the line as a whole. I definitely didn't like Logan's game. And for the most part, I kind of barely even noticed Couture out there in a positive sense. But I did feel that Meyer made some really good passes. He had that near goal opportunity that Peterson made a really great save on. And I thought while they didn't score on the power play, I thought they generated some opportunities, and Meyer was usually involved in those. So I didn't feel that he played quite as poorly as maybe the stat line looks with the negatives. Hurdle, like I said, I think he played really well. Unfortunately, as I'm a huge John Leonard super fan, but I just haven't loved how he's fit so far on that line. I keep hoping that he'll get a few more games there, and I think his work in the AHL recently has been amazing. But I feel like that line, when you're seeing the puck, it's pretty much all Barabanov and Hurdle. Leonard's made a few okay drop passes here and there, but I just haven't felt like he's fit in. And that's a top 6 line. You need some sort of production there.
He's a little trigger shy, and that's kind of
timid.
Exactly. He looks timid, although I do like his puck retrieval. I think his puck retrieval in the boards has been good, and I think that was the big knock on him, was that his strength in the boards was not great, but I think he's done a better job protecting the puck. But I think you're absolutely right in the fact that he kind of looks a little timid. He looks like a guy that is deferring a lot of shots. And when you're on the line with a Barabanov, a guy who, is very underrated in his playmaking ability, but a guy who likes to bring the puck through the neutral zone, who likes to kind of distribute, you need to shoot. You need to be more of that shoot first guy. And that's what we need to see from Johnny Leonard. And, I hope he does get a couple more looks up there, but he needs to really put the emphasis on his shot.
On Leonard, I got to ask you if you've noticed this. It's something that I've noticed a few times, and it's kind of bugging me. And I don't know if maybe it's something that Bugner has told him or he's raised as like a concern from previous times being in the NHL. But I feel like he cuts his shifts so short. And Hurdle and Barabanov sometimes are out there another 15, 20 seconds beyond that. Like there was a shift today that I noticed, and I noticed also the last game where they had the puck in the offensive zone. They had possession, and then they threw it into the corner. Didn't really lose possession. I think Hurdle was chasing the puck, and I just saw Leonard bolt off to the bench. And I was like, they had been out there for maybe 30, 35 seconds at that point, and it was just a situation where I was like, what is happening here? I've noticed this a good half dozen times over the 2 games he's been with them.
Well,
he's just cutting these shorts.
You're not seeing things. You're not seeing things. I mean, he was the forward with the least amount of ice time tonight at 10 minutes, 20 seconds. And, Dave B. Pilot bringing in this up, and I think I have to agree, is the problem with Leonard is Bugner. I think that is a directive from Boogie, like, hey, look, you need to get off the ice, and you need to make sure that your ice time is limited, very, very carefully, and I think that's by design. I don't think that's I don't think that's a coincidence that you do see that. Which I don't agree with, because if you're gonna put a guy up on the second line, you gotta let the leash off of him. You just let him roll with his line mates. You can't be adjusting, here and there, tweaking each individual within the line, because then what you're doing is you're also ceding to the other team, like, hey, look, you don't have a lot of confidence in this one player. He's being rotated out. Here's a guy that you can key off on when he is on that line, because it is a guy that they are sheltering a little bit. And it bears out Rudolph Balcers. He had 12 minutes of ice time tonight, but he was on the quote unquote fourth line. So, just kind of goes to show you where Bugner's thinking is. I mean, Logan and Timo both clocking in at 19. Tommy Hurdle with 20:42. So, I mean, Tomash has got basically a minute over on Logie. And I don't know, man. I don't like putting forwards in that 18, 19, 20-minute range. I think you're really starting to diminish. You're getting diminishing returns at that point. I really do like to keep the forwards in the 17, the high 17s, 18s, if you're going to have extra, power play time and stuff. And again, it just seems like there's not enough trust in, the Scott Reedies of the world and Noah Gregors of the world and Jonathan Dollins of the world. And while I don't agree that should be how it is, I guess I understand in which, Bob Bugner's trying to coach basically for his job. But look where you're at in the standings. Look what the pieces that you have on the team. Look at how young these forwards that you're trying to integrate in. You're not doing any favors to them by sheltering them, by continually tinkering with them while they're on a line and screwing with their just screwing with their identity on that line. I really do think that it goes to kind of neuter the line a little bit, and it goes to show that some of the players are on shackles and some are not. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's kind of the thing that's been frustrating for me, is because a lot of these guys that the Sharks have that I think are underperforming, I think it is somewhat of a confidence issue. And I don't know if it's the way they're being handled with Bugner. I don't know what goes on in the room, but I think it's fairly visible that even Dahlin, he looks a lot of times like he's lacking confidence nowadays. And Leonard, anytime he's been in the NHL this year, has just not looked like the player he was the first few games of last year. And I know these guys have NHL level talent. It's just a matter of finding the right fit for them and kind of utilizing that talent and getting the best out of them, which I don't think Bugner's getting.
It looks like a team that is afraid to fuck up. Like that's what that's what this looks like. It looks like a team. One, the defensemen look like, they look very scrambly, especially Burns and Carlson. If they cough it up on their blue line and they let the puck skip over or whatever, they get all scrambly and they seem like a little trigger shy, from the back end because of worrying about the transitional game. It looks like the young kids are trigger shy and are, afraid to fuck up in their own zone and get stapled to the bench. So I think it doesn't serve the team well to be playing as if you're still trying to go for the playoffs. You need to start now looking at this kind of like in the baseball perspective of, okay, it's September call-up time. You look at what you got in the farm system. You look at integrating younger guys, having them be playing more, and sure, you might lose some more, but at least you start to get some more service time for some of these young kids. Start to get their confidence up a little bit and start to tell them, hey, look, like, don't be afraid to make a mistake playing your game. You know what I mean? Making a mistake being creative or make a mistake while trying to take a well-placed shot or something. You know what I mean? So I think you're absolutely right. It looks like a team that's tentative, and it looks like a bunch of kids that don't want to screw up.
Yeah, and I think that last point you made is the key. Like, we've got 20 games left in this season, and it would take an absolute miracle for this team to make the playoffs. What they should be doing is trying to figure out what they have with the players that are either in the depth system, in the AHL, or in the bottom six of this lineup. And we've got a lot of these fringe players. So what I would be doing is, I like the idea of throwing Leonard on that line, but then just give him the freedom. Tell him, look, if you do mess up, we're going to play you tomorrow too, because I want to see what you've got and I want you to play your game. Leonard is not a bottom six player. I don't think he's ever going to be at the NHL level. He has to fit in that top six. And you're not going to get him playing freely if you're making him think he's going to get cut down to the AHL if he has a bad game. So, I mean, I did like that he kept him on the line and came back with him with those two guys for this game. And I hope he does for a couple more games. But I just still feel like there's something else there with some of these younger players that you just watch them struggle. Like Dahlin was very good the first half of the season. I'd say the first 20 or so games, he was one of our better goal scorers. And then he just hasn't looked the same the last 20. I mean, maybe that's the grind of the NHL season. I don't know. But I think there's something there between that relationship between Bugner and some of these guys that just isn't working.
Yeah, and I think Bugner is very much one of those, kind of stopgap win now kind of coaches, and really isn't one of those coaches to help mature a team. He's not like a Cooper or who else is a good coach of younger players? I would venture even someone like you look at Todd McClellan. I mean, in the job he's done integrating the young players into the Kings lineup. I mean, you look at what Dallas Eakins has done with the Ducks, and again, you just have to look to the California teams and see where they're at with how they play their young players, and look at where the Sharks are at and how they play and deploy their young players.
Yeah.
And I mean, no further do we have to look at 26 minutes of ice time for Dursey, and he's 23 years old, and who's carrying the water for the Sharks? It's Brent Burns, and this is a man that needs help the poor guy out. He's been shouldering the team for freaking a decade.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I feel like almost you mentioned the Ducks. You have someone like Zegras who's absolutely amazing. So I'm not comparing him to the guys we're talking about in the Sharks, but I feel like if he was on the Sharks, Bugner would probably bench him for a game if he like tried the Michigan goal and failed or something. And it seems like that's the kind of coach he is. It's like, no, you're young, you're gonna earn your stripes, and anytime you mess up, I'm gonna make you feel it.
Exactly. Grand Desir 12, thank you for checking in. Hey, Erica Mark, hitting the like button to show support, man. What a drag, another loss. Yeah. Well, I think like we've already said, just come to embrace it. It's gonna be okay. We got to look forward to that high draft pick, but yeah, no, I mean, again, it's the way in which you lose. Tonight was one of those sour tastes in your mouth because, of course, you didn't muster any kind of offense. Again, we look at the potential. You even just look at the potential of the team that was deployed tonight, and I think if you tweak the ice time utilization a little bit, and you start to maybe make some bolder decision as to making Andrew Cogliano, Nick Bonino, and Matt Nieto a fourth line instead of your third line, you might start to have something there. But until you get a coach, or at least have a system in which you can have these young players flourish and not feel like they're going to, get sent to the doghouse every time they make a mistake, I don't think that that's going to happen. And so I wonder if maybe it is time to start looking at a different, voice behind the bench, and, dare I say it, somebody with some fresh ideas that isn't of the Bob Bugner, Peter DeBoer, line of tough nose hockey. I mean, what do you think, Mark? I mean, now that the Hurdle deal is in stone and it is final pen to paper, you can't change the players now. The money is locked in. So you only got organizational changes now. I mean, what says Mark on how to fix this?
I'm kind of I mean, I definitely don't think Bugner is the coach that's going to bring us to the next generation of winning hockey for the Sharks. I haven't really been upset about him being the coach for these last couple of years because I've been part of the team tank where it's like I'm rooting for us to almost not be great so we can replenish the system, get some good draft picks. And I frankly just didn't care too much about the coaching. I think this year it's a little bit more of a glaring weakness, and it's been a little bit more frustrating to watch with some of his decisions. Like you said, I don't understand why Burns is getting 27 minutes a game. Like, he's not playing great. He really hasn't played great this entire season. And while he still has okay offensive numbers, I really think it's more visible this year than any that the time he's playing is weighing on him. He's not in that young prime years anymore, and he's no longer that Norris caliber defenseman. Um, I just think there needs to be more balance there. And like you said earlier, I think Bugner is in that state of kind of playing for his job or just playing to win now, maybe more so. And that's kind of clouding some of those decisions, or at least that's me giving him the benefit of the doubt rather than just assuming he's a terrible coach. So I think,
No, and
yeah,
Ryan Bayer, and I'll go ahead and add this to the chat. Thanks for commenting in. He's saying, are you thinking the Sharks are trying to tank and grab the first overall pick? No, that's not what I'm trying to say, and what I think what both you and I are trying to articulate, Mark, here is that the deployment of the young players, the concern that the players have to not mess up within the Bob Bugner system is part of the problem. I think also if you did tweak the utilization of the kids, yes, there might be more mistakes, and yes, that therefore playoffs and wins on the win board might, come at the expense of playing those young players. But you have to get them experience at some point. You can't just continually be like, okay, well, this is the future. The future is in a year, or the future is in 2 years, or the future is in 3 years. No, I mean, you gotta see what you have. And I think at this point, it's pretty clear that the Sharks are not going to make the playoffs. It's unfortunate, but I mean, if you just listened to the ESPN broadcast tonight, their statisticians had it at a 1% chance for the Sharks to make the playoffs. Look, I am not a Nostradamus. I am not a statistician, and I would tell you any chance is better than no chance. That being said, I don't think it's in the cards for this season. That's okay, but what I want to see now is growth and development. That's what 100%. I want to see.
Yeah, and I think that's what I'm looking for as well. We have this group of young players that, as we've mentioned, are kind of fringe, and we don't really know what we've got with them yet. And they're kind of not exactly that next wave. We've got a bunch of juniors players that are coming into that next wave, but we've got these guys that we need to really figure out if they're NHL players or if we need to move on from them. It's a whole bunch of them. There's a few of them in the AHL still, like Blichfeld, Chmielewski. These guys, like, I would just give them minutes the rest of the year. And if they're not going to earn their time at this point, it's time to move on. They've been with the franchise for several years, and it's time to get new players in there and offer new opportunities.
I mean, like a guy like Noah Gregor is, I love him as a player. I think he's got a lot of skills, and I think he's got talent, but he has got to unleash and play without the, without that fear that it seems like he's got in his game right now. And if he can't do that, then it's time to see if somebody else can, like we had said, Chmielewski, this is a guy that we touted, a few years ago as, okay, he could be a potential as a third line type player, maybe even a fringe second liner, and yet he has just fallen completely off the face of the earth.
Yeah, just no development there. And and like you said, even about Gregor, he's kind of one of the things that, like, I just feel like we've had these players for the last 4 or 5 years that we like, and we want to find reasons to like them, but then they just never consistently end up on the score sheet, and they never consistently fill the role we need them to fill. Like Gregor, his speed is elite. He's a good player, and he's fun to watch, but he just doesn't produce.
Reminds me of Torrey Mitchell.
Yes, exactly. He's a Torrey Mitchell clone in that aspect, minus the major injury. But like, it's just, we need guys who are going to fill in on these third and fourth lines and provide depth scoring, and we just haven't had that. Since that year we went to the conference final. So, it's not the only problem with the team. But
there's a lot of problems with this team.
Exactly, for sure. And as Ryan mentioned here, I don't think this team is even close to being a team that can tank, because despite the fact that they're not maybe a playoff team or a contender,
they've already won too much, and they've already won too much at this point.
Exactly. With Hurdle, Meyer, Carlson, and our goaltending playing the way it's been recently, like, you're just not going to tank. And you look at some of those teams that are on the bottom, like the Coyotes. These teams are god awful. They look like AHL teams on a daily basis. So we're not like that bottom of the barrel. But I mean, I think at this point the goal should be to get in that top 10 range, and hopefully, cross our fingers, we win the lottery. I mean, that's our only chance, I think, of getting near that top pick or two.
Yeah, and like another guy that we long lamented and thought he was going to be the third line center of the future, Dylan Gambrell. That was a guy that we
Hmm.
waited a long time to finally try to get something, and he never did pan out. And like Matt Nieto is a known quantity at this point. And I hate to bag on Cogliano and Bonino, but I mean it's just like, again, that should be your fourth line, and those should be guys that are like the final complementary pieces to put you over, not necessarily being members that are gonna Nick Medino took 15 minutes ice time tonight. That's not something that you want from a forward who's at 33 and could never really skate like the wind anyways. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
and definitely not the way he's been this year. Him and Cogliano, I definitely think they've helped with some of the defensive aspects of the team and with the penalty kill. But yeah, Bonino, I think coming to the season, I thought maybe he'd be a serviceable third line center based on his prior production. But there's been a downward trend for him for the last few years. He should probably be now in that fourth line role, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate because I like the player, but
Yeah.
at this point, he's played 57 games. He's got 16 points. Last year
Hmm.
in the shortened season, he had 55 games played. He had 26 points. So, I mean, he's definitely been on the downward trajectory, and yeah, it's unfortunate because I in his prime, he was a good player and a player that was, vital to Cup success. But unfortunately, he's just not that player anymore.
Yeah.
That being said, Mark, I mean, you being on before trade deadline, we had the Hurdle contract extension, kind of the state of the franchise, mini state of the franchise, kind of, going through with the contract extension, how that resets, everything and our expectations and what the team should be going through. Like, what are your thoughts and just kind of what do you want to see in the run up to trade deadline and then on trade deadline and then kind of going forward?
Um, yeah, I think the hurdle signing puts things kind of a little bit more in motion. It shows that the team, I mean, they've said it before. A lot of fans kind of, and myself included, wanted them to kind of accept that the team's not a playoff team right now. But they're obviously not accepting that. So hurdle signing means they're going to be going for it. So if they're going to do that, then I kind of want them to commit to that. And I think at this point, with the way this season is, I think you need to accumulate as many pieces as possible at the deadline. So I think you make a few trades. I'm open to signing Barabanov and I'm open to signing Middleton. I think they're both good players, but I think you listen to offers to see what you can get. Like I'm seeing some of these trades that are happening, teams getting first round picks for defensemen that I don't feel are much better or even maybe even a bit worse than Middleton. If we can get a second round pick and a third, or maybe even we do the good road trade where we throw in a mid round pick and get a first round pick out of a team, I think you make that move because then you can possibly be getting a top six forward or even a top pairing defenseman in the first round. So I
I
think they
mean,
need to.
Middleton coming in, you look at him and you look kind of like the comparable that Josh Manson was
Mhm.
one of the guys that was thrown around as a comp. And while I like Middleton's game and I thought he's very much stepped it up this year, I don't think he's had the longevity
No.
that that he had, or that he has. But Josh Manson has. But I could definitely see the second round pick, and I could definitely see the second round and a prospect being a fair value for a guy
Yeah.
like Middleton.
Yeah, so I think they need to evaluate those options. If they find that the trades aren't worth it, then I'm perfectly fine signing those guys. They're depth players that I think help the franchise out, and they also won't cost too much. And then the team really needs to get another good player in the first round of this draft, and then this next wave should at least be in the AHL or the NHL coming next season. Whether it's Gushin, Robbins, Ozzy, Bordelot, all these guys are going to be coming up, and even Eklund's going to be coming. His season actually, I think, should be ending in the next week or two, so he should be coming to the AHL after that ends. But I think I don't think there are too many moves the Sharks need to make to become a competitive team again. I think they just need to make the right moves, and I think one of the glaring holes this team has right now is they need another elite winger for
Mm,
the top six.
yeah.
So however they get that, I don't know how it's going to be, but they need another guy to complement those. Like they have a solid four for the top two lines. You got Hurdle, You got Meyer, you got Couture, and I'd even throw sometimes Barabanov in there as a solid 4 for the top 6. You just need 2 more good players to complement them. Now, whether that's Eklund jumping in and being a top 6 forward, maybe. I don't know. That might be another couple years away. But I think they really need that top line winger. I'm going to throw out a name like a Forsberg type or a Johnny Gaudreau, a player who is a proven talent that will elevate those players around him while also providing the performances we need. If they're going to try and make the playoffs every year, they need to make some of those moves without sacrificing the future. So it's going to be an interesting. It's
I
going to be an
mean,
interesting week. I want to see what happens.
yeah, I mean, for me, I still think that the team is still a good second, third line type of center. Because, all right, I've kind of already come to expect, or not expect, but I've already kind of come to accept the fact that the Sharks are not going to have like a bona fide number one type legit center that like a Connor McDavid or a centerpiece type center like that. Yes, Hurdle is definitely a 1B or a 2A type center, and same for Logan. So I think what you're if I'm looking at this roster right now, I think you try to emulate somebody like a Vegas, where you try to throw out 3 second lines, you know what I mean, and have Cogliano and Benino, Nieto as like a fourth line. That would be a great fourth line, complemented with like, an Eklund third line with maybe like Bolsers and, insert, winger there. And then, on that second line, um, I'd really love to see Jonathan Dahlen grow into that second line type player. But maybe it would behoove the team to put him on a third line with a Dahlen and like a Bolsers, have those three together. That way you can have, Barabanov and Hurdle with like a more established, type winger. And then maybe you could put a John Leonard with a Logan Couture and Timo Meyer. I don't know, but there are certainly some permutations, but I definitely see where you're getting at with the top line winger. And I think, I would agree with that. I don't know. Would you keep Eklund in the top 6, or would you try to put him as a center and really make him a dominant third line center, kind of when you start him, ease him in easy, and then kind of work him the way into the top 6? How would you
Um,
work
it's
him in?
tough. I would kind of take the Hurdle approach where you start him on the wing, and then as he progresses and develops, becomes more of a center. I think he's kind of small still. I've seen a lot of his highlights from Europe, and he still seems like he gets dummied a lot physically.
Mm.
So I think he needs some time, I think, before he's a center at the NHL level. But the way I'm looking at that third line, and I kind of agree with you, I think that actually is one of the blocks between us being a competitive playoff, even top level team. But I think there might be the internal players for that. I just think they're about 2 years away. I think next year is going to be that year where a lot of these guys who are either in juniors or college or Europe right now, they're going to need that transition year where it's either AHL time or NHL. And then I think they'll be productive in 2 years. And I think out of that group that I mentioned earlier, what you really need is a third line center and
Yeah.
another complementary winger. And I think they're going to end up coming out with both of those
I mean,
fills.
Tommy Bordelot really seems like he might be able to fill in that top
Exactly.
line winger spot. The center is what I'm more concerned about finding, to be honest with you.
Bordelot has played center in college with Michigan, and I think it just depends on his game and how it develops. I don't know if he's necessarily going to be a third line center type. And I'd say the same thing probably for Eklund. I think they're more offensively focused players. And at least in the next couple of years, I think they're going to be more complementary players than driving a line. But from that group of next wave players, if we can get two, which I don't think is unrealistic from the talent we have there, to 2 slots to fill the NHL roster in the top 9, I think you're going to be in a good place from the Sharks. And at that point, it's just filling what I originally said of that top line winger. I think externally, whether it's via trade, free agency, or something. I mean, who knows what we're going to get in the first round of this year's draft, and maybe we find a gem somehow. But I think they're like 3 pieces away. And then, I mean, we haven't even gotten into the defense yet, but I feel like we have a few fringe players there as well that if they develop and just provide those complementary minutes, um, we have at least a playoff team. Um, Beyond that, I don't know. It's tough to see this team really being an elite team in the next 3 to 4 years without some sort of miracle happening. I don't know, unless Wilson or Will, whoever is running the trades at this moment, pulls off some sort of amazing trade, or one of our draft picks turns into, like I said, a miracle pick. It's just hard to see this team really competing with the top level teams.
Yeah, I mean, Ozzy Weisblatt is a guy that got mentioned in the chat too, as being maybe another winger type. I think what we're going to start to see, and because the way that the organization has decided to shift their draft to go from targeting a select type forward going towards best player available, which is the way that they should have been drafting, mind you, but it is a departure from the organizational's traditional take a big centerman, continue to have good right-handed offensive type defensemen, take a big burly left-handed defenseman. They had some keys to what they liked in their development system, and you could see it from past picks and what they were trying to do. But I think what we're going to start to see is that we're going to be a center short, like a big center short in the upcoming seasons in the Pacific Division, and that's what I'm concerned about. It's just that the Sharks might not be big enough to compete with the Trevor Zegras and Anze Kopitars of the world.
Yeah, and two more points I want to make on that. So, and specifically the mention of Ozzy. I think Ozzy is going to end up turning into more of a bottom six forward, and I think he's going to be a valuable one. I think he provides a lot of heart and grit and speed, and I think but I just don't necessarily see top six upside in him. But on the other hand, the one player that I think is kind of floating under the radar for the Sharks is Daniil Gushin.
Mm-hmm.
He is absolutely tearing it up on a god awful team in juniors right now. I know he's an overager, or not necessarily an overager, but a draft +2. But he's scoring at a goal per game rate, almost a 2 points per game rate, and he's just going absolutely nuts there. And I think he has elite level skills. The only concern, which shouldn't be as much of a concern these days, is his size. But I think of the prospects we have, he has some of the biggest boom potential. So if everything does go right there, I feel like he eventually could slot into the top six. He's more of a boom or bust player, like I said. I don't think he necessarily is a guarantee to be an NHL player, but if he makes it and everything hits, I could see him being an elite level player.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just looking at the depth chart right now. I mean, Thomas Bordeleau is what they have here. Just on the centers, they have Thomas Bordeleau, Linus Oberg, Alex Young, Max McHugh, Theo Jacobson, Igor Spearmanov, and I mean, out of those, Thomas Bordeleau. But again, I'm just concerned about his size as a especially a third line center.
Yeah.
He's 5'11", 181 pounds. It's not the necessarily the height. It's just that he seems a little lanky. You know what I mean? He just doesn't seem like he's filled out his body yet. So I don't know. Like you said, hopefully we'll get some hits, and of course, if the players end up being good wingers, you can trade players, and you can move assets and stuff to get what you need. But again, I think what I'd like to see out of this next 20 games or last 20 games is just, again, more utilization of the young players, get to see really, what you have, and start setting expectations for next season, and start the races and the battles for the jobs for next season.
Yeah. And I'm kind of really hoping, I think it would be a great end to the season if we could have another Barabanov type performance. It's like how we all were pretty excited about how Barabanov was the final 2-3 weeks of the season last year after we acquired him for basically nothing at the deadline. If we could have one of our young players do that, or maybe the Sharks find another random player who's just not doing well in one city or another, and they trade for him and give him a shot, and he performs, that would give me some added hope for the depth of this team going into next year. But haven't seen that recently. So, well, I mean, it's TBD as to whether that'll happen. But we got what, 4 days to the deadline, so I think there definitely will be some changes over that time. I can't see this team not making a single move, even if they just use cap space to get a mid-round pick. Like they got to do something, right?
Yeah, they got to do something. And Dana, thank you for checking in. Always a trooper. Always seeing you on the chat. So thanks again for checking in with us. She has a question. What do y'all think about Goudreau? Can he be a replacement when Reimer's time is up? Well, Reimer is an interesting question because I don't know if he's going to last throughout the rest of this season and or could be a trade commodity piece even next season if the Sharks do decide to keep him. So, let's just say for the sake of argument, that it's going to be at least a season before we have to make some kind of, real move in the, in the nets. And from everything that I've heard, you've got a guy in Benjamin Goudreau that the team is actually pretty high on. It was one of the guys that Joe Will highlighted in the media availability after, with Hurdle and talking in on one of their players that they feel is going to be a guy that, is going to be a piece going forward for the team. I mean, his OHL numbers in the playoffs are outstanding. You look at his OHL numbers in season. I mean, this season he's got 33 games played, 3.58 goals against, and an 896. Not great, but he does have some good pedigree again in the playoffs, and again, one of those players that could maybe grow into the role. But with goaltending, it's always so difficult. I feel like we don't really get a good gauge on a goaltender until he's mid-20s. I mean, what do you think, Mark? I mean, you're better at the dark arts of goaltending than I am.
Yeah, I'd say you're right. Goaltending is super tricky. So it's almost impossible to project. But what I will say is Ben Gaudreau is the best goalie prospect we've had in a while. I think at least at the age that he's at. I mean, there was definitely some excitement over Melnichuk, but he just hasn't worked out, I think, so far. But in Gaudreau, what I think we have is a goalie that's very much like a young John Quick in his style. He's very aggressive, very athletic, which is different from what we've seen recently with Sharks goalies, where we go for that tall, positionally sound goaltender. So
I mean,
I think
he's not a shrinking violet, right? I mean, he's
no,
6'2", 174 pounds, and he's only
yeah,
19. So,
yeah,
he's going to
he's
be
just
a
not
little bit
six
big.
six or
Yeah,
6'5" like Jones or Hill, but um,
a battler. I
yeah,
think a guy that battles and a guy that
mhm.
elevates in the playoffs, and I think that's what the team really did key off on. I mean, you look at some of it, like the OHL Cup. The guy posted a 935 save percentage in 2 games. Had 2 goals against. Or you look at some of the underage 16 tournaments that he's been in, a 965 and a 133 goals against for North Bay AAA tournaments. I mean, he does have some good playoff pedigree, and I think he does have some good lineage, and I think he does have the physical assets to be a good goaltender. But again, goalies are just one of those positions that I say mid-20s at the very earliest is when you get a real good clue in, unless it's somebody like a Carter Hart, right, who is just clearly or Spencer Knight, where they're just clearly above the rest of the pack at their age group for goaltending.
Yeah, I think he's got a longer trajectory for sure, and I think what you should really look for next year is to see if he makes the World Junior Championship team. He's been picked as one of the guys who people are expecting to possibly even be the starter on that team next year. So to see what happens with that, but I also for the people who are looking at his stats, I wouldn't read too much into his stats this year because his team is not very good. And it tends to be tricky with goaltending stats in juniors. But if you follow me on Twitter, you've been seeing that I retweet almost on a weekly basis him and his highlight reel saves. They've really been pumping out content of him just making diving across the crease saves, just multiple saves, rebounds, everything. He's just been lights out with some of these highlight reel plays. So I think the foundation is there. It's once again, it's just goalies. You never know what's going to happen and who's going to develop into something great. So
Yeah, and it seemed like for a long time the Sharks had that goalie factory moniker for a
Hmm.
long time, and especially under the Warren Strelo development program, they were cranking them out. But
Miss those days.
yeah, right. But unfortunately, it's just one of those things where in an organization, the strengths of an organization tend to ebb and flow, and right now goaltending is just in one of its ebb moments in this organization. But I do think that they have addressed some of the goaltending through the draft. I think that this is also a team that has relied heavily on European free agent goaltending finds, and they always seem to scrounge up a goaltender out of some European league. So I know we're all a little concerned because there isn't an established goaltender right now. I think, both Aiden Hill and Reimer have 2-year deals. One remaining on their contract, and it's a little concerning because we haven't had a fixture, a mainstay fixture in the net, in a little bit. I mean, well, since Martin Jones, and I think that does leave, some people a little uncomfortable. But I will tell you the increased battle that we've seen between all of the goaltenders in the nets this year has been great. I have rarely come out of a Knights game saying I wish goaltending would have been there more, or wish goaltending could have saved the night maybe 2 or 3 times during the season. Have I said that? I
Yeah.
thought goaltending this year has been far superior than previous years. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's basically night and day the way I see it. Like I feel like last year, every game we were like, well, how would this team be if we had good goaltending? And now we're more like, okay, well, we've got pretty good goaltending. How would this team be if we had more depth or more this or this guy was playing better? So it's no longer the focus there. If anything, Reimer's been right there up with Timo in terms of like team MVP.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, I thought Aiden Hill, when he has been healthy and has really gotten into a groove, I think he has been serviceable. I'm not as down on him as as Ian. I know Ian thinks that he's just another guy, but I don't think that he's had a terrible season this year. He's got a 906 save percentage, 2.66 goals against. So that would tell you average, right? And I think that's last year we were just begging for average goaltending. So that being said, Reimer tonight would end up posting the 923 save percentage. And like you had said, I think he's been co-team MVP. He's kept this team in a lot more games than he should have. And I don't know, going into next year, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting. I think I'm of you though. You just try and maximize what you can out of this trade deadline. If you get your socks blown off by an offer for for a James Reimer, then you explore it. You do that risk reward assessment. If it doesn't seem like the reward is as good as the loss of a James Reimer, then you don't pull the trigger. And you keep him, and you keep him for next season, and that gives you just a little bit more space to groom a guy like Goudreau into the backup spot if you want it. But yeah, I mean, try to maximize what you can. Same with a Middleton, same with a guy like Cogliano. And from there, you again, I just want to see that growth.
Yeah. This time next week, I hope we have a few more draft picks. I think that's really what it is for me.
Yeah.
Preferably second rounders, but or above or first if we're lucky. But yeah,
Oh
something in
my
that
goodness!
range.
If you could somehow swindle a first round pick for Jake Middleton,
Mm.
that's larceny at its finest. So let's see what the Sharks organization can do. They always make things interesting, even if it's just the small little deals. They always seem to add intrigue. Last year, Barabanov was one of those guys, little intrigue kind of deal, and we've seen what he's added for a season plus. So we'll see what the organization will do. That being said, Mark, what are you up to these days, and where the people can find you?
Just been really busy. New York City life is kind of back to normal here a little bit, which I guess is a good thing. So just been very busy, but they can find me as always at Mark SJS on Twitter, constantly tweeting about Sharks prospects, retweeting Benny Gaudreau videos, and doing lots of things like that.
Awesome, awesome. Thanks, Mark. And as far as me is concerned, you can use my first name. That's Eric, Erik, Landy, Landi, across all the social media garbage platforms. The next couple of weeks, I will be out, so I won't be coming back at you on another After Dark until I believe it is the 30th. I want to say, but it's the end of the month, and I will be out in the wilderness of Zion, doing a male bonding trip, so to speak. It's a friend's bachelor party, so we're going to be out there for a week, doing some hiking, doing some kayaking, maybe. Just hanging out in the outdoors and stuff, and kind of resetting before his big day. And as far as any of the other ventures are concerned, yeah, check out all the social media platforms. And in case you missed us, check us out across all of the podcasting platforms, that being the Apple Podcast Store, the Google Play Store, the YouTube Rewind, SoundCloud, of course, Spotify, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, all that and more across tealtownusa.com. And let's see if I can do this right. Keep it real. Keep it teal. Keep it real, Teal. Thank you, everybody, and have a great night. We will see you after the next one.